beautiful Etherians. Princess Jenny here with a couple of announcements for you ahead of the ep. So we have finished the third season, as you know, and we are now having our traditional post-season Race and SPOP roundtable. It's going to be a really great one today, you guys. We have two wonderful, wonderful guests. And so after today, we're going to take a quick 1-month hiatus between seasons so that I, Princess Jenny, have time to pack up all of my belongings and my kitty cat and move my whole life from New York City to beautiful Plumeria. I'm moving, and I've lived here a long time, guys, so it's gonna take some doing to move all my shit. So I needed a little bit of time to do that, so I hope you won't mind missing out on April 12th. It's just one episode. Our next episode, Season 4, Episode 1, The Coronation, will drop on April 26th. But if you are a patron of ours, this brings me to point number 2, you will not be bereft of Heodora for all of that time because we are having our next live watch and live chat on Sunday, April 16th. At 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So if you are a patron of ours at $5 or above, you can live watch with us. And if you're a patron of ours at $10 or above, you can live chat with us after the live watch. What will we watch, you ask? Well, you can help us vote on that if you are a patron. So that is all the April happenings for us. And with no further ado, onward to our third, now traditional installment of Race in SPOP. You're gonna love it.
Hey folks, and welcome to a very special episode of Heodora, Queer She-Ra Podcast. I'm Force Captain Meph, they, them.
And I am Princess Jenny, she, her.
And today we are having our third edition of our Race in SPOP Roundtable conversation with two very special guests.
Yes, we have two amazing guests today, both of whom are fabulous, sparkly, and very accomplished in their own right. We have Princess Alba and Head Sorcerer Sean.
Woo! Yay! Hi, friends.
Yes, hello.
Oh my gosh. The way that I am tickled hearing Princess Alba. I'm so tickled. All of my childhood dreams are coming true.
Yes, only at Heodora do you get the titles of your wildest fantasy dreams.
Because mine is a Force
I beg to
Captain.
differ with the sparkly, by the way. I'm a creature of the night.
Yes, you and me.
True. You can also be a creature of the night if that is what is in your heart of hearts.
Yes,
I did not mean to force sparkles on you against your will.
Yes, how dare you.
Yes.
You're lucky I'm not Catra. I would have scratched you for that.
I apologize. Goth dreams are also valid.
Yes.
So let me do some formal introductions so everyone knows all the awesomeness that is both of you. So, Princess Alba Daza is an emerging Latinx writer, director, consultant based in Montreal, Canada. Alba has been working in the film industry for 10 years. In addition to her work in film, Alba was a producer on the popular podcast Buffering the Vampire Slayer. Woo!
Woo!
She has consulted on anti-racism in the film and education sectors, consulting on ethical casting and teaching youth about colonization in media. Her art focuses on telling and celebrating the stories of marginalized voices, giving them space to breathe and thrive. Through her work, she is decolonizing popular culture and slaying white supremacy. Fuck
Yay.
yeah.
Yay.
Yes. And Head Sorcerer Sean, who we already know, is an author, educator, and huge nerd from Richmond, Virginia. As the mind behind Project Simsum, she creates and runs learning activities that connect curious seekers with Judaism and each other through imagination and play. When she's not coming up with fun new ways to engage people in Jewish text and tradition, Sean is a huge fan of fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, who channels her love of these genres through theater and role-playing games. Her debut poetry collection, The Red Door, is a dark fantasy that combines Jewish folklore and mysticism with queer romance. It's currently available on Ben Yehuda Press. And of course, that link will be in our show notes.
Hi, friends.
Friend.
Hello.
Hey, friends. Welcome to the Heodora Roundtable.
Yep, it's a very, as if you can't see this table, by the way, listeners, you can't actually see this table, but it's exactly like the table in Bright Moon, like the really like hyper enhanced like D&D table that they have with like the grids and stuff.
There's even an empty chair for Micah.
Yep, there's an empty chair for Micah.
That's right. Bless. And if anyone sits in it, we will give them the stink eye.
Yes.
Like forever. Don't you know that's Dad's chair?
Yeah, so you don't sit in Dad's chair.
I'm deliberately sitting in Swiftwind's chair.
Oh, Comrade Swiftwind.
Did someone say Swiftwind?
The chair that they didn't give him. You're like, I gave him a chair and now I am taking it. I kind of love that.
Yes, even though nobody has said Swiftwind for all of season 3. And nobody has noticed that no one has said Swiftwind for all of season 3. It's been a busy season.
Yeah. I mean, they've been in a lot of their own stuff, and we learned a lot of stuff about Etheria in season 3 that we really kind of didn't know.
Yes,
that doesn't really have that much to do with Swiftwind, other than he was, transformed by, We've
learned a lot of things that Swiftwind would definitely be upset about.
Definitely, and like what the magic of Etheria is, and who kind of came to quote unquote harness it, which is
what happened to the magic, who has organically and inorganically been deciding how that magic's going to flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and passing it out.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, we've known from the beginning that colonization is part of this story, but our last 2 race talks, we haven't really been able to get into it. Even though we are a spoiler-full podcast, the point of that is not to constantly get ahead of ourselves. It's just because we want to be able to acknowledge foreshadowing mostly without it being a problem. So up until now, it's just been fairly vague. But now that we're at the end of season 3, we have found out that the first ones were colonizers who came to Etheria and stole its magic to funnel it into a giant weapon at the heart of the planet that they control through the sword, which is the key to this weapon that is wielded by one of their own, that is She-Ra.
Right. And we also kind of go into a little bit more of like of Hordak's kind of own parallel story with colonization as well, where we kind of learn how Hordak stumbled upon it, right? It's Hordak, stumbled upon this place and, made it his own. And so we kind of have these parallel understandings, both of colonialism, right?
It's true. He fell through a wormhole just like Baby Adora.
Right. He discovered it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
he got lost and discovered it.
It was not his own choice in the same way Baby Adora did.
Right.
But once he was there, he made conscious choices, unlike infant Adora.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to get into that whole, hopefully we talked about that whole, raising children to fight your wars for you, your wars of conquest for you. Not a good look, Hordak.
Definitely not.
It's a big one.
Yeah. I heard the term war orphans, but I know they're like, are they war orphans because like they were already orphans, or were they made orphans? I'm wondering what's going on with that.
I have a lot of questions about
so much baggage.
I have a lot of questions about where the cadets come from, like where you guys talked about like Rogelio in the last race episode, and talking about there's Kyle, Rogelio, and what's the Lonnie. Like
our beloved Lonnie.
Like all of these kids, and Katra and Adora, and like
even Scorpia to a degree.
Scorpia. Well, Scorpia at least we know is from Etheria. Like we're like, okay, you're from Etheria. We understand that like her parents gave Hordak the land. Did they though?
Gave.
Yeah, exactly.
What did they do?
Right. Well, I don't know. Was it sort of like
what did they do? Because they seem rather happy in those pictures.
Yeah, and
then they're not there anymore.
Yeah, they're just gone. And
maybe they went on vacation.
And they mysteriously disappeared.
They went on vacation. Yeah.
It's like they sold the company and then they fucked off to like like Mexico, right? Like like every trash like CEO, tech CEO ever, right?
And just abandon their child moms to be a child soldier.
Yeah, just abandon their child. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they totally wouldn't lie to her about that.
Scorpion's powers are pretty cool though, gotta say.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a lot of questions about where did those kids come from? Where are their parents? I was thinking a lot about like the language that you were talking about in the last episode, and thinking about like, okay, well, why does Rogelio speak a different language? Is he from the same planet? Are there other people like him? Like, what's going on here? You know, it's interesting because I'm doing my master's right now, and my first term paper, I actually wrote about Bridgerton and the race representation in Bridgerton, and there were a lot of parallels in what y'all were discussing in the past couple of episodes. And what they tried to do in Bridgerton is kind of just be like, race is of non-importance here. I mean, it's worse in Bridgerton because it's like real, historical fiction, and like it's a whole mess when you actually start looking at it. But like, race is not. It can't be non-consequential in our society and the way that we read things. So I was just like thinking about all of that, and thinking about like Adora. So she's a colonizer, and she's like white and blonde and super Aryan, and she's the savior, and she's the good one, and she's like the biggest eye roll from Sean.
Sean's eye roll just like defied gravity.
Yeah.
I was just like,
it's just like there's so many things about colonization. I think what you're talking about, like the actual kind of impacts of it, or who goes and like takes resources, right? But then how that colonization gets embedded into the social structure of things, and how then people interact with each other based on that social structure that originated from colonization, And there's so much in Shiraz. Like, just rewatching it, I was like, wow, I did not notice how problematic the show was the first time around. Like, I love it. It's great. It's super fun. But damn, they really could have done better.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's an important lesson, especially for maybe some of our younger listeners who haven't been around the block as many times as we have. And it's like, oh no, you're saying there's problems with this? Does that mean I can't love it? No, we're not saying that. Everything we love has some degree of problems, and that's generally always going to be true, and it's true with Buffy.
Yeah.
I think we all love Buffy, and there are problems there.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely true with Buffy.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. It's not like we're going to say that Buffy as a show is fundamentally racist, but it doesn't mean that it didn't do racist things. Just like Adora, right? Like, we're not saying that the show is just as a thing racist, but there are racist elements in the show.
Right. And I think that that's a good reflection of, just like real life, you can be a good person and do good work in the world and still make fumbles and missteps and do harm and do racist harm, and then learn from those mistakes and carry on and do better. Yeah. And, ND has also made mistakes and been public about it and apologized and learned and done better as a result. And, ND has also raised $40,000 in one night for Black Lives Matter and wants to do better. And so it would be a mistake to say that if something has made a racist mistake, then it is bad and must be thrown out. And only things that are pure can have value, because what does that say about you? If you've ever made a mistake, are you fundamentally bad? Is there no hope for you to do better? Of course not. Yeah. We're all works in progress.
Yeah. I have a whole series of Tumblr posts about puritanical fandom culture, and a few very long, loud rants building up. But there's a lot about the whole, well, if it does this one thing wrong, throw the whole thing in the trash thing, that I'm just like, what are you, 12?
And like, what's left?
It's like, I'm sorry, if I did that to everything that was personally said a harmful message about people like me, I'd be looking at 4 blank walls all day. And that's no way to live. That's number one. And number two, I think beyond whether work makes mistakes or not, just, and maybe this is just me getting older or whatever, it's just like I'm starting to kind of come to grips with the fact that people in a time and place were in their time and place. And that means like, and being human means you come with limitations. They knew what they knew. They didn't know what they didn't know. And while that's not an excuse or a justification, it's a factor to comprehend. It's like, okay, this is the limit that they were working with. And also to kind of stop putting so much pressure on one work. Like She-Ra cannot be all things queer. It just can't. It's one work of art. What I think the challenge is for like future creators is to take what She-Ra doesn't do very well and build up on that and do the next thing better. And then the people who look at that do the next thing better. And it's
right.
Yes, absolutely.
That is something you can actually do something about. Besides, like,
that's
throw the whole thing away.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah. I mean, that's what an artist does. An artist takes from what they saw, right? And then, like, it's such a big motivation. Like,
absolutely.
I could make that better. I'm going to build on this. And I feel like, that is such an important understanding of both creating art and consuming and understanding art as well.
Yes. This does not mean that I say it's okay to play the wizard lady's game. I'm not saying that. The wizard lady.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, got you.
Yes, none of us endorse anything that puts money in the pockets of she who shall not be named.
Yeah, she sucks.
I have like two things I want to say on that point. And I think that, one, I think that, the biggest thing that Hey Adora. The biggest thing that She-Ra did wrong is not having enough representation behind the screen, right? Like having people in the writer's room. Yeah. And that is just so often the case. I mean, it's the same thing that happened in Bridgerton. It's like people just not writing their own experiences. And so then you're going to get like a muddled outcome. And that's just what happens no matter what. And then the second thing I want to say is that to reduce one piece of work or art to the one thing that makes it bad. And this is not a universal statement to everything, because there are some things that are maybe we should think about the artists themselves, you know what I mean, as a person. But and that's a whole other debate, but whatever. But to reduce something like She-Ra, which does have so many good qualities, or Buffy, which has so many good qualities, simply to the things that it did wrong, is to also reduce the people who enjoy it to that one thing that they are marginalized against. So if we're going to talk about She-Ra, right, and it's like, oh, well, it did this like racist thing, and like, we're going to like cancel it, or we're not going to explore it, or we're going to stop watching it, then for me, like, I'm not only a person of color. That's not the only thing I watch She-Ra for, right? I watch She-Ra because I like magic, because I like sci-fi, because I want to watch queer women, because I have all of these other facets of my personality that She-Ra does fill. So we have to be able to understand that people are multitudes, that they hold many different things within themselves, and that it's disappointing when it's consistently the thing that you are oppressed against representing in something that you love, continuing to oppress you. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't joy to be found in the other aspects of it. I think that's an important thing to think about.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that definitely speaks to me personally in how I felt a lot in the past few years in terms of Jewish representation in media, which so often fails. And it's so disappointing, especially in queer spaces, where I'm so excited and so happy. This queer thing is so great. And it's by and for queers. And it's so obvious that it was written by queers. And I feel so seen and so represented. And then this really shitty anti-Semitic representation comes in, and I'm just like, why? And so often there's someone Jewish at the helm, and I'm like, what are you doing? This was so unnecessary. This really, really oversimplified, stale anti-Semitic trope comes in.
And then it becomes like,
it's okay, you can say you people.
I didn't like Do Revenge. I was like, what is this?
Anyway, you didn't like what?
I loved it except for the Jewish villain. I was like, the only unequivocally villainous person in this whole movie who is just like two-dimensional character, unequivocally a villain, is the only one that is like unequivocally Jewish coded in this very flat way.
Wait, what are we talking about again?
In the movie Do Revenge, did you see that?
No.
Yeah, I didn't see it either.
It's a fabulous movie, except for this one very unfortunate aspect.
Yeah, see,
isn't Veronica from Riverdale in that?
Like, as Alba was saying, it's like, well, it's not necessarily like I don't know if you have this experience where it's like, sometimes I can handle it and sometimes I can't. Like,
that's
some
it.
days it's like, water off a duck's back, it's like, whatever. But some days I'm really feeling those like, if I have to look at this, I'm going to be upset. It's like, I can't deal with it right now.
Totally.
I didn't feel destroyed by it, but I just felt very disappointed. It was so unnecessary. It didn't add anything. And it just played into just like so basic, so overdone tropes. That are just so two-dimensional. And I felt similarly about A League of Their Own. It was such a triumph
the show
in
or the
every
movie?
way.
The show or the movie?
The show.
The show.
Okay.
The show.
I saw both.
The movie didn't have any Jewish representation at all. But, the show had a Jewish character. And again, created by Abby Jacobson. Like, what are you doing to us? So you have this one Jewish character.
Who are you catering to, right? Like, who is this for?
Right.
Yeah, but it's like, why bother putting it in at all if it's going to be such a negative, stereotypical trope?
Because it gets a check mark.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's how they sell it, right? Because it's all about money at the end of the day. There's somebody in the boardroom. There's somebody who's saying, or like maybe that's all she was allowed to get. We don't know what happened behind the scenes with Abby Jacobson.
We don't know what happened.
What I mean?
But it seemed
it's disappointing.
It seemed like there was no added value. It's like, why are you going to do it at all if it's going to be so negative?
I bet
so
it wasn't really her decision. I bet.
Maybe. There's no way to know.
There's no way to know.
So that speaks very much to what you were just saying. Like am I going to boycott A League of Their Own, the TV show, because of that issue? No, I couldn't possibly. It's a triumph in every other way in terms of the queer representation, the number of queer voices in the room, the diversity in every other category was a triumph.
Yeah.
And so it is more complicated than just they failed in this one way and therefore it's wholly a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Yeah. Can we like just put the Puritans to bed in our culture?
For real, man.
I wish we could.
It's very tired. Like, wow.
Unfortunately, it's kind of the basis of our society.
I know, but they got kicked out for being like no fun at all.
Yeah, they didn't even celebrate Christmas.
Like no fun at all.
Yeah,
they're somehow better than everybody.
Yeah,
because of that, right? That's the
That's that shadow projection. That's what my mama taught me. When you point a finger at someone, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
You smelled it, dealt it.
Yes.
Okay, that one I've heard. Yeah, I'm sitting here being like, shadow projection. You smelled it, dealt it.
Look,
Anyways.
Yeah.
Etheria.
So Etheria.
I feel like you were on a bit of a tangent there. Please continue.
Which tangent?
I don't know. I feel like there was one though.
Etheria and colonization is just like, okay, but what you were saying, Alba, is like really important about who's in the writer's room and who's behind the camera, because that comes through. I think I said it before, but it's like if you're within a minority group, that you can tell when someone is like speaking from their own experience, and you can tell when somebody's talking about it in a more academic sense, where like, and it's nobody's fault. Okay, internet, it's nobody's fault. It's just what happens. It's our socialization. It's just part and parcel of being alive today in this society. And so the stuff when it comes to like colonization and whatnot, it's like, I think that say if there were a serious contingent of Black and brown people in that writer's room, the colonization would have gotten a different focus. I would say it probably represented better, but like you can tell when it's like, so these people from far away came here and they exploited this land with people already on it for resources, and they built a super weapon out of it. And yet there are so many different ways that something of that magnitude would affect every facet of society. Because whenever in real life, that's what colonization does. It doesn't just It's not just a thing that happens to people. It changes the societies it comes in contact with.
Yeah.
It's like whether it's Africa or Asia, it's like you see it everywhere where it's like, where did this weird hyper-Christian element come from? And say around Black Americans.
Yeah.
Slavery. Like how did Christianity become so dominant? And even in other places, like, wait.
Slavery.
It's slavery. And then there's,
I don't know if people know the correlation between that the people who had found God, like Christopher Columbus used Christianity as a justification for slavery and for colonization. I learned this recently. He was he believed that the end was imminent. Like he believed that the apocalypse was impending. Yeah. And he was like, we have to save people. Like he was like a Gospel of John kind of guy. Which is pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
And so he thought that, the end was imminent, and he used Christianity as a tool to justify colonizing the South America, because the indigenous people there didn't believe God. They hadn't found God. They didn't meet God. So they were like the infants and they had to be taught. And if they, accepted God, then they were like, okay, like you can live kind of vibe. Like you can, be kind of human. But Africa, a lot of Africa was Muslim at the time and had been introduced to God, the Christian God, and was like, nah, thanks, man, we're good. And they were like, oh, well, then like you're not human because you don't believe in the Christian God. And so that's how they justified slavery. And they were like, you're not smart enough to understand that God is here to save you. So, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Columbus, I don't want to say a fun fact, but this is something that most people don't draw the dots with. Christopher Columbus bankrolled his whole expedition thing with, guess who? Like Queen Isabella.
Oh, I know this answer.
King Ferdinand and Isabella, who consolidated, say, the Spanish Empire in 1492, which is the same year they kicked all the Jews out.
Yep.
So the Christianity thing does not surprise me. So yeah, we're talking about Spain. Yeah, you mean Spain that's super duper Catholic, the one that has Torquemada and all them and like torturing people for I don't know, this, that, and the third. Yeah. So the element of using like Christianity as a justification to go forth and colonize people, not surprising at all. Which, to bring it back to Shira, the ideological underpinnings of it are missing.
Yeah.
And it's like these people just up and decide to colonize one day. And I'm like,
it's eerie.
Yeah, it's like...
Well, actually, as you were talking, I was thinking ahead a little bit to when we get to know Horde Prime and his giant green baptism tub.
Yo, that was so weird.
Even though... It's terrifying. Even though you're right, the ideological underpinnings are missing in a way. Like, there's no book of Horde Prime. But there is an ideology that we know of. But there is an ideology of a sort because they're all chanting as they put whomever into the goo.
Cast out the shadows. Cast out the shadows. Cast out the shadows.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
and they have this whole
and they're like
pure and purity meaning purity meaning that we're going to wipe out your sense of self. And make you into an acolyte of Horde Prime, which is basically just an empty vessel. We're going to wipe out your individuality, your emotions, and you'll just be an empty vessel waiting to receive
orders,
instructions on what to think, feel, and exist from Horde Prime. And you're all just little photocopies of this one dude.
Yeah.
And he's the only one who really is a person.
I kind of like have a yes and with it because what Sean was talking about of the underpinnings aren't there. And what you were talking about, okay, so, but there is kind of there is the parallel between that and, the feeling that there is some sort of meaning behind it. But I don't think that I think that it's based on kind of a vibe, right? Like, it's like the Horde Prime vibe is that because it's supposed to be allegorical. We're not actually getting like a real drive from it. It's just the vibe of like, guess what this looks like instead of it is this and so.
Yeah, but I think it's
that's
coded,
right.
though. You know, I think it's coded.
Oh, definitely coded.
Coded
Yes.
as Christianity.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, it is definitely
I think
like
that's like another way to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Something I found interesting listening to your other talks that the three of you did is that I actually think that Horde Prime is coded as black. I don't see him as a white man with dreads. I see him as like, and you know, even though he's like, it's like how Mackenzie McDade, who's incredible, says that Faith from Buffy is coded as black, which I think is really, really interesting.
Interesting.
I think it's very easy to see in the case of Faith.
Yes.
But what about Horde Prime?
Well, I think a lot of people are actually coded as black in She-Ra. I think Horde Prime, and like, first of all, his voice is a black man.
Well, he is voiced by a black actor.
Yes. Yeah. He's voiced by a black actor. I mean, you know, this is my take, right? This is like, I'm not saying this is like the ultimate truth. But
no, I'm curious. I'm open to your thoughts.
The dreads and like the vibe, like I was just like, when I saw it, I was like, this man is coded as black. And I was like, hold on a second. This most evil dude has dreads. And I don't think that most white people would read him as like a white man with dreads. It's just not how I read him. I read him as like a non-human, coded as black, evil man. You know?
Is this like along the same vein of as Darth Vader in a way? Even though Anakin Skywalker was supposed to be like,
yeah,
I heard that. I heard you guys talking about that too.
I
don't know the Star Wars references enough, but probably, you know, probably. And I think that you know, Catra is also like coded as, you know, at least like a mixed woman. Like she's definitely not coded as white,
definitely,
you know. And I think even Shadow Weaver, I think is like, I saw her as coded as black, and it wasn't until later in the show I was like, oh, she's not supposed to be black, you know, like the hair, the voice, the whole energy. I was like, this is very like, I just saw a lot of representations of associations with blackness amongst the evil characters. I really saw that. And like in my rewatch this time, I was like, wait, like what's going on? And then there's just this like really like innocent, naive, like just wants to do good white girl who's just like happens to be the chosen one, and she's going to make the good decisions in the best of heart, and like her decisions are the good decisions in terms of the audience, you know? And so that really, really did not sit with me well in this watch. And I didn't see that the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes multiple viewings because there's so much going on with the show.
There's a lot going on.
But I see where you're coming from about are they being coded as black? It's like, yeah, they are putting the black voice actors to work with the
yeah,
you know, like why are all the black voice actors except for Bo? Why are they all evil?
Yeah. And it's like, okay, but there are...
Yeah. Well, they're not all evil. I mean, don't forget Natasha and Lonnie. And Lonnie.
Well, Lonnie is with the Horde, though.
I mean, she's with the Horde, but she's not evil.
She's not
we
evil.
Are huge fans. We are huge fans of the Horde
Jenny,
cadets.
She's not
None
evil.
of them are evil.
She's not evil, but she's with the bad guys.
She's with the Horde.
She's with the bad guys. Yeah.
And Natasha's great, but she has like very minimal lines. In the last season, there's more.
But you're right. I'm not trying to discount your point. Your point is very valid. Yeah. Especially for Shadow Weaver and Hordak in Horde Prime and Wrong Hordak, because those three are all one voice actor.
I didn't see Hordak as black or Wrong Hordak as black, but I did see Hordak Prime as being coded as black the most out of all three. They are all the same voice, but visually plus the voice to me added up in a different way than the other ones.
And then the thing with Shadow Weaver, I think I dipped my toe in it. I didn't want to say anything too firm because it's not my place to say in any kind of firm way. But I'm like, what's going on with the face covering with her?
Yeah.
It's like, is this a hint at job, or is this like a
Yeah,
what are they saying with that?
We don't have to say anything firm, but we could suggest some Islamophobia. We could suggest some, Middle East fear vibes. We don't, but who knows? I'm just saying it. It's just interesting on which characters are representing what elements and what they represent to the show and our relationships to them. I personally really like Shadow Weaver's character. I think she's freaking awesome.
I love Shadow Weaver.
I love her as a character. I wouldn't want her to be my mom.
Definitely.
I mean,
I don't want any of those adults to be my mom.
No.
Yeah, no. When I say I love Shadow Weaver, I don't mean I want to hang out with Shadow Weaver. I mean, I think she's an incredible character in terms of bad guys who are compelling and interesting and multi-layered and not just a flat two-dimensional, I love evil. Like, I hate season 7 of Buffy. And one of the main reasons that I hate season 7 of Buffy is because I think the first is a terrible big bad. It's just so flat and two-dimensional. Just like, I'm the evilest evil that ever evil. I love evil. Nobody evil's better than me. It's just so boring. There's no motivation.
I love evil, guys.
There's no layers. It's not interesting.
They were tired.
And Shadow Weaver.
They were tired.
Shadow Weaver is like the opposite. Shadow Weaver is the exact opposite of that. She's interesting. She has layers. She has motivations. She's multivalent. You don't always know what she's going to do. And Lorraine Toussaint, is obviously an incredible actor. And, she's had a long and storied career. And in terms of her range and the different roles that she's embodied, she can really make you keep guessing.
Yeah, totally.
She's really good at being bad,
really
though.
Good. She is very good.
She is really good at it.
And I think it's really unfortunate that the circumstances of her casting do fall into that, Black actors being the bad guy trope. It sucks.
Yeah, and I think something interesting to think about is that these characters, like Shadow Weaver and Catra specifically, these are characters who are primarily focused with surviving. Like, they're going to survive. And Shadow Weaver is, yes, should we say that she's going to have, she's looking for power. She wants power, which is interesting because, I wish we knew more about her origin story because nobody just kind of, some people want power, but typically not that kind of person, And Catra also is framed as
we don't know anything about her childhood.
Yeah, Catra also is kind of framed as oh, well, I can't have a Dora. Well, I'm going to take everything from her kind of thing. So she can't have anything.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of well, how are these characters engaging with the world around them in terms of why they want the things that they want? Because it's a lot more complex. Like, you guys are talking about trauma and stuff and being a woman of color and the trauma that comes along with that. And then kind of flatly being oh, well, they just want power and we have to take it back from them. But then what is that? These women of color with power, they're not allowed. It's bad for them to have power. Who's allowed to have power in this story?
Yeah. And it kind of, and when you bring that up, that makes me think about if we really wanted to have a really deep dive into colonization and whatnot and what that does to a people, if we really wanted to go there, we could talk about each of these characters as different responses to colonization. Because you don't, it's not just
I want to go there.
You know what I mean? It's you have the what do you call it? Not the colliders. Shit.
Colonizers?
No. It's the
colluders.
Colluders.
They're in collusions. The colluders, right? In collusion.
Collaborators, or the collaborators and the people who join the bad guys, knowing that they're bad and knowing that they mean nothing good for them. And then it's and
Scorpia's family,
right? Or Catra,
no, I actually
right?
think Shadow Weaver herself, Shadow Weaver and Catra, where it's they are deliberately aligning themselves with this power structure.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though they know
we see Shadow Weaver make that choice.
Destructive to their own people.
Yeah.
And it's and it's really easy, I guess, from people I hate to say this thing, but from relative safety, because I'm Black in America. How safe am I really? But
fair.
It's easy from a position of relative safety when there's not a literal world war on your doorstep to wag your finger at them is how dare you? Shame on you. But at the same time, it's like, let's be honest, that kind of thing does happen.
Right.
And and it will be interesting to see the kind of, I guess, put together a profile almost of like the kind of person who's most vulnerable to that, or the kind of person who's most likely to do that. Because it's like, is this something that
vulnerable.
And
I think that's
because
really
that kind of weird stuff comes up in like ethnic minority media like all the time.
All the
And
time.
Netflix specifically. Netflix specifically. There was Dear White People. And one of the things about Dear White People that kind of made me go, it's really funny that the light-skinned biracial chick is all militant and shit. And the show kind of shits on the dark-skinned Black women who are kind of like, I don't want to say collaborators with white supremacy, but they're not as openly resistant to it.
Yeah.
And it kind of judges them for it. And it's like, okay, they have a completely different, they're living in a completely different context.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And those narratives don't really acknowledge that. So it'd be really interesting to like examine these characters as like different types of responses to colonization, because you have Adora, who's like, I had to take the caller this. I think she's more than this. I'm not reducing her to this, but she's that guilty white liberal who finally woke up to, oh my God, they're beating up Black people like hotcakes. And it's like,
it's not that far.
Also, like, oh my God, look at how much power I have. I should probably use it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think I mentioned it, like, what was it, the last time I talked, where it was like, Adora is very comfortable walking into these situations and assuming authority.
Yeah.
And it's not that
because everyone keeps handing it to her.
That too.
Whether or not she's comfortable taking it, everyone keeps trying to give it to her.
Yeah. And that also could be a response to colonization.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's also a response.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, well, you look like you should be in charge.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's also like the element of like, who are the indigenous people on this territory, in this land?
Right. That's kind of a sticky question because the indigenous people of Etheria are of all shades.
Yeah.
I kind of think that the only Adora is the only first one, but she only found out that she was a first one in the middle of the show. She's lived her whole life thinking that she is Etherian. But the only Etherian white person in my mind is Perfuma. All of the other Etherians are various people of color. There are various types of Asians or different types of brown people, but they are all Etherian.
Or different anthropomorphic
creatures.
Types.
There's Catcher, there's Rogelio.
Are they though?
There's
because
different townspeople.
I'm trying to think of like other non kind of humanoid or like animal human crossovers that are not part of the horde in Etheria.
Their background characters. You see them at
the entire.
They're like these starfish-looking people.
There's people with gills. There's people with horns. There's lizard people.
Yeah, there's that entire village that knows how to party and turns into
Elberon.
Everybody in Elberon. The mushroom people.
There's all different kinds of people, but they're all still Etherian. Yeah. So I feel like the question of colonization in terms of Adora, it almost wouldn't matter. Like the fact that she is a colonizer and she only finds that out, at the end of season 3, it almost doesn't matter. Like her whiteness, she would still be white whether or not she was a colonizer. And she's one of the only white people.
Yeah, her and Kyle.
But that is something, though.
Her and Kyle and Perfuma.
Yeah, but like, I don't. Can you elaborate more on what you mean that it wouldn't matter? Because
so basically, because basically, like they all, the premise of the show, they all know about the first ones.
Yeah.
In fact, Adora has never heard of the first ones in episode 1, and Bo and Glimmer have to explain to her, these are our ancient ancestors who, they were the first ones who colonized this planet and studied it. And it's unclear to me, and I think this is somewhat up for debate, whether or not Etherians think these are all of our ancient ancestors, or these are just people who lived here in the distant past and they disappeared and we don't know what happened to them. But either way, everyone alive now thinks that these people all disappeared in the distant past. And including Adora. And Adora, it's a revelation to Adora that she is an alien. We see her find out this information, that she is descended from these people who were here in the distant past. So she has grown up her whole life thinking that she is indigenous to this planet. And everyone else engages with her thinking that as well. But regardless of that, she is still one of the few white people.
Yes. I mean, but that is that not colonization?
So she's,
because even if it's irrelevant that, you know, within Etheria, I mean,
I'm not saying that her fact that she's a colonizer is irrelevant. I'm just saying it's irrelevant to the fact that she is white. She's still, like, they always knew she was white. She was always going to be one of the only white people with whatever white power exists.
I think what you're saying is that within the canon of the show, it doesn't matter. But when we look at it kind of as with the critical lens, it's like, well, hang on a second. This is like one of the only white people in the show, and is you know, happens to be
like she was
a descendant of these colonizers. Yeah, happens to be a descendant of these white colonizers. Happens to have the tools of the colonizers. Just happens to be a good colonizer.
I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just saying that in terms of the way people relate to her. No, I'm just saying the way people relate to her, they don't even know that she's a colonizer for the first half of the show. So it can impact the way they relate to her when they don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
I think this is how you know that white people are writing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah. Because I think, because like for me, I don't know, like as a person of color and like sure in Etheria it's different, but like if this is, the messaging is just really clear to me. Like the subliminal messaging is just really clear as like this person is better, you know, and race just has to play into that. And sure within like how Etherians would be, you know, it's hard to say for sure how because it's just not discussed, right? Like it's hard to say for sure how they actually treat race and how they actually treat like everybody who's different. Like I don't have a firm grasp on that aspect of their society, but it can't be irrelevant, you know, I think.
Right. I didn't mean to say that it was irrelevant. I just meant that while they don't know that she's related to the first ones, it can't impact her relationship to them if they don't know that she is descended from the first ones. They think that she is an Etherian, so they treat her as an Etherian for the first half of the series.
Yes. I still think
shit. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll get to it after you make your comment.
I'm
sorry, Alba.
I think no, it's okay. I think what I'm struggling with is kind of like the intersection of what is real in the show versus what is real in the representation of what the messaging becomes for us.
Yes. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
It's like, sure, maybe those people relate to her in a certain way, but like when we look at how society actually treats this kind of situation and we apply it there, then they're still treating her as a white person would be treated.
Yes.
Even if technically she's not, and it's unclear. So like, you know, and then like.
Right. So I'm saying her whiteness exists whether or not she's a first one.
Yes. And then we add to that she is a first one and is a colonizer, you know, and like add to that then she actually is an alien source of, you know, whatever with whoever intentions and you know, the best technology and the best like information and
that
blah blah.
Adds to the inequality. Yes.
And still they're like, oh my God, you have a sword? What? Like, you know. Anyways.
So there, I guess I'm drawing 2 points together, and then there's my other point that I was shitting about a minute ago.
I want to hear the shit point. I want to hear
I'll get to the shit in a second. But the first thing I'm noticing is that what I think is confusing with the show is that in our world, colonization is so intimately tied to race that a show that includes colonization as a major theme or major element of the setting and somehow treats race as purely cosmetic, it's confusing. It's confusing because you can't really see where the show is coming from in regards to that. That's my first thing. The second thing, the thing I was shitting about is that, this is like those quote unquote white people who find out about their Cherokee princess ancestor being some slave woman.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And then they care all of a sudden.
Yeah, then they care all of a sudden. And then it's like a personal identity crisis resulting from that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then they have to tell everyone they meet about how they're part Cherokee, and then they take on ownership of this identity that has nothing to do with their life.
Or they use it as an excuse to be
Cherokee
racist.
Princess shit is often. My personal theory is the Cherokee princess. First of all, they didn't have that in their society like that.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, passing. Yeah, Black people running away, passing as white if they're light enough was a thing. So it's just sort of like, that Cherokee princess was probably an enslaved woman who passed. And that's what she would say. Like, if somebody asked, so exactly what are you? That question, that annoying ass question is, I can't figure out what box to put you in. What are you?
Where you from? Where you from?
Like a zoo exhibit or something. And it's like, I'm... ...
Yeah. It's funny. People so often when I worked in restaurants would ask me like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Canada." And they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, but like, where's your family
really from?
Where are you really from?"
Yeah, and then I mean,
where
that's like
from?
all the time. Whatever. You go, you have whatever, and then like, oh yeah, my mom, this, that. My mom's from Venezuela. My dad's from Chile. Oh, you speak English so well. It's like, I was born here.
Yeah. Isn't it weird how that happens?
Those are the craziest things to servers, man. They say the craziest things. Be nice to your servers, guys. Just don't try to make a funny comment. Don't make a comment about somebody's name, about their race. Don't tell them they speak English well. Don't.
I just tip them well and shut up.
Yeah,
just smile and tip a minimum of 20% unless they spit in your food in front of you.
I thought it was 15. Did it go
and even then, even then, tip 18
really deserved it.
Yeah,
I mean, unless you did something shitty to deserve it.
Yeah,
at that point, just leave.
Yeah, there's a whole weird thing about Black people in tipping too, where it's just it's sort of like, okay,
the whole tipping system in general is a whole
that too.
Yep.
Apparently, I found out.
Yes. Yeah.
When I used to work at summer camp, a lot of the staff there was imported from the UK because there's a lot of programs set up to import summer camp staff from the UK, and they kind of cheat all the money out of them. So we would always have to have a meeting at the beginning of the summer so the head of the camp could tell the servers, on your days off, when you go into town and eat at restaurants, you have to tip. It is not optional. It is part of their base pay. They make a sub-living wage. If you don't tip, it's going to make us all look like huge assholes. You must tip your servers.
Yeah.
So tip your servers, everybody.
Please tip them.
Anyway.
$2.13 an hour plus tips is just not.
Yeah, I want to circle back to what you were saying, Sean, about the issue of on the show race being cosmetic, because I think it really speaks to what Alba was saying about trying to tease out what's true in the reality of the show versus what is actually true in the actual reality of people in a writer's room writing a scene and real people watching it. In terms of like, what is the impact of a story about colonization written by a group of people who are all white, who don't really understand what they're saying about colonization.
Right.
Because when race is entirely cosmetic, you have a group of characters who on the surface are all a variety of skin colors, but they were all written by a group that's entirely white. It's clear that there is not genuine cultural diversity in those characters, even though on the surface they have, diverse skin tones. And I think, like, going back to an earlier question of, what does that relationship to colonization look like on the show? I think, and you asked Alba, like, where do these kids come from? These war orphans. I think that if there was genuine diversity, cultural diversity in the writer's room, we might have seen, I don't know, you guys tell me if you think this is accurate. We might have seen more of the horde manager level people constantly telling the cadets and the kids, you're so lucky to be here. We rescued you from your trash towns and your trash cultures, and they're so backwards and shitty, and, all the reasons why you're lucky to be here. And now you have to go raid those villages and those trash people. And aren't you grateful that you're here? And, you'd be living in squalor in those terrible places if it wasn't for us, your great saviors.
I mean, I think that part of that is that it is a kids show, and I have a feeling that they didn't want to go too dark.
In an age appropriate way.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, this show gets pretty fucking dark.
No, it does. It
does get pretty dark. But
and there are a lot of shows that get, kids shows that get dark, and
like Avatar and Korra also.
Yeah.
There's plenty of darkness. I think they could pull that off in an age appropriate way.
No, you're right. They could. But I think that the writers I can see them justifying it. Like it's a kids show, so we don't have to kind of get into it. You know what I mean? I can see that happening, or I can feel that happening behind in the writer's room. I could just kind of sense it. But I think also even, you could see the managers putting the kids down, but you could even see the kids talking to each other. I think there would have been more conversations between Rogelio, oh my God, Kyle and Lena right?
Lonnie.
I know her name.
One of the only Black characters.
I know.
We love Lonnie. She's our favorite Butch heartthrob.
Yeah, no, she's great. And I wish we saw more from
And who does Lonnie's hair? No, never mind.
Yeah.
Who does
you're
That's
right.
a really
man?
good question.
And
Nobody,
then she's
apparently.
And then she's good when it gets cut off. Okay.
Well, nobody says that she's good. I think that's trauma when, Horde Prime captures her and deprograms her so she's an automaton and cuts off all her hair.
No, 100%. 100%. But the fact that she starts to change while she's there, has this kind of transformation, also physical transformation, and her personality starts to shift before that, but mostly there. I think they're related, and hair is a big
I
deal.
see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, it's she's
Definitely.
I mean, metaphorically she's shed the weight, right, of her past. She has, whether or not it's a great thing, she has been born anew, but then she's, born. So I feel that. I see what you're saying.
I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
You were saying that you could imagine, if there had been more diverse voices in the writer's room,
yes, I could see
the Horde kids talking to each other more about their lost villages and their lost cultures.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that Catra would have just been a very different character. Maybe not very different, but I think we would have had a lot more nuance to her background. And I think that it would have been really interesting to see her having conversations with Lonnie and Rogelio and Kyle, and kind of having these other connections that aren't just with Adora, and having this kind of more of a community. And I think also having Catra and Adora is this, having Catra only have Adora also says a lot about love and about, who is worth your time? How do you love people? Who do you receive true love from? All of these things.
Ooh, and now that you bring that up, it's you have this character who's coded as a person of color, more or less obsessed with this white woman.
Oh, yeah.
This white girl is yeesh.
Yeah, totally.
Not a good look when you think about it, but
happy for them.
And
love that they end up together. Love it.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yes.
Beautiful. However,
beautiful love.
That makes sense.
It doesn't mean it couldn't have been done better.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Catra being completely isolated. And this is seen as normal.
Exactly. Yeah. Her choice, right? And her choice.
Yeah, it's she wants to be alone, or she doesn't want to be around other people. She doesn't want community. like, we could say, yes, trauma. We could say that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the show, and I understand these are 22-minute episodes, but like, oh God, this is like a whole other like series of conversations we need to have about colonization and trauma and how people of color respond to both.
Yeah.
Or how colonization can be a form of trauma and how people of color respond to it and how it's like the specific trauma, the racialized trauma.
Yeah.
Of that. It's just
Bell Hooks has a whole real good book about it called Black Looks.
Okay.
Love Bell Hooks.
Oh, was it race? Yeah, Race Looks with
Black
Bell.
Looks.
You said Bell Hooks.
I said Bell Hooks. Yeah,
I
Black
have
Looks.
that.
It's so good.
I have that.
It's so good.
It's like, oh God. No, we're not going to say
Bell Hooks ranks a lot about love too.
Does.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to ignore the comments about Beyonce for the time being. But and we're not going to talk
Listen,
about
she's one person.
Yeah,
she's entitled to a
like,
rich diversity of opinions.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
They, I would say that one of the main, I'm sure this is not a controversial statement. One of the main themes of the show is trauma. And I think, if they were to do it again, I think that they would agree. Certainly, Andy would agree that it would be worth devoting some time, more than zero time, to the trauma of colonization and devote some screen time and some real work to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and I think also like, and sometimes I don't even want to put this on the show per se, because fandom bears some responsibility too, in the sense of like, well, like they'll say weird, to me it's weird shit, but like they'll just be like, well, Catra is toxic and Adora's right to cut her off and this, then, and third. And I'm like, how, this is going to sound so mean. How very white of you. It's,
is it mean?
Because
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like, I guess it's just like me overcompensating for all the other times I said something honest about race and it bit me in the ass. So like,
fair enough. I haven't had those times yet, or if I have, I haven't listened. So
it took some maturity and some growth to finally be like, oh, that's a them problem.
Yeah, it's a hard them problem. It's a hard them problem. And I think also just like more people are going to feel seen and agree with what you say, then people are going to be mad. And even if it's 3 people who agree and are like, fuck yeah, and 10 people are mad, well, it wasn't, you didn't say it for them.
Yeah, true. So yeah, it's like.
Also, all of our listeners know that we are major Catra lovers.
Yeah.
Well, they don't know that by now.
It's not a shock.
The podcast is called Hey Adora. So
yes.
Yeah. And it's just, if they don't know that by now, maybe you have like a couple of hate listeners for all I know. But before they angry tweet, or if anybody's still on Twitter after Elon Musk, but like, or even the angry tweet, it's just
we have yet to receive any of those. But if we do, it's just more press, and then we'll probably have 100 other people to jump on that person and say, "No, fuck you."
Yeah. So
that would just be more press and more dialogue. So in the end, it's all good.
Yeah.
Jenny is officially welcoming controversy.
Like when I'm talking about fandom stuff, like on Tumblr, where I was talking a lot about race and fandom stuff and how people respond to different characters' actions and who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
And and it's really interesting how you have this woman of, I don't even want to say woman, because like, how old is Catra anyway? like is she drinking age yet?
18 to 21.
Yeah.
Canonically, in season 1, they're about 16.
Okay.
No, they're 18 to 21.
Okay, so they're
so by season 3, they're like 19.
Young woman of color. Very young. A young woman of color.
Very young woman of color who might be a woman according to the legal definition, but her brain has not finished developing yet.
Yes, for sure.
I don't get cis vibes.
I'll roll with that.
I don't.
Yeah.
I just get Big Dyke vibes, but I could go with non-binary.
She could be, gender is a spectrum. I just don't get like 100% cis,
Oh,
sure.
Yeah.
There's
I'm not going to argue against that.
That's a whole other conversation too. Where it's like,
whatever. Like everybody has, anyways. This is my
yeah, of course.
light interpretation.
Yeah, AJ's voice, that husky quality lends itself well to, gender ambiguity.
Also.
Yeah. I've had to deal with that my whole life. And then at this point, I'm just like, just don't call me sir. Just don't do that.
You want to trade?
Yeah. And it's like, and I know like for me, I can't untether gender and sexuality in such a clean way. I really can't. It just, I don't experience it that way. And I don't connect to terms like masculine and feminine in the same way that the majority culture does. Like, there are certain things that feminine requires, and I put this in quotes, that I don't identify with. And there are certain things that masculine requires that I definitely don't identify with. Yet at the same time, I strongly feel woman fits me. It just doesn't, I just don't express it the quote unquote right way. And it's not just because I like women. So it's always kind of, it's like that thing I mentioned, like I think the first time we had this race and SPOP conversation about who owns queerness and who, and I put once again, who owns, in quotes, queerness and whose paradigms of gender and sexuality are dominant.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So, I remember that.
Right. And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is nobody can own those definitions.
But that's understandable.
It's better that way.
Right. It's understandable.
This is open source code.
Yeah. It's understandable, but functionally.
Yeah.
Right.
It does.
Yeah.
The vocabulary we use, the way we conceptualize these things.
Yeah.
The way we police these identities. Very much so.
Yes.
Very
and the intersection of
1,000%.
Sorry, the intersection of race and gender as well, and understandings, white supremacist understandings of people of color having a more masculine, whether or not this is masculine, quote unquote, understanding of gender, and these come from white supremacist understandings of race and gender as well.
Yeah,
and you see it. Yeah, and you see it all the time. Like we had, what's her name? Casa Samaya, they literally forced testing on this person. Yeah. Because they were performing too well at sports. they were beating too many white people at the game is just so beyond the pale. Yep. And we had that with the Williams sisters, when both Venus and Serena, where it was like, oh, they're so mannish. Because they have muscles or something, or because they're not delicate when they play, because they play real hard and they play to win. Yeah, and it's like, for some reason, I guess they expect women not to exert effort in sports or something, or to not look like they exercise hours every day, just to and practice and do all this stuff every day. It's like, well, what?
I think,
I don't get it.
I think ultimately it's like women are just not allowed to, like women and femmes in general, and just not allowed to own what your body looks like, right? Like you're just not allowed. And triple that when you're a racialized person. And it's, I think especially when you're in the spotlight, it's, there are so many rules to follow and so many things that you have to think about all the time. And your appearance is just so much at the forefront of things. And it's just, and then add sexuality that I forget, just it's like, woo, that's just a whole, it's a whole vibe.
I'm not exactly sure where in the big picture of this conversation this particular point is going to land, but I feel like this is a good moment to, I'm sure you guys already know this, remind the audience that the first drag queen that we know of was a Black man born into slavery, William Dorsey Swann.
Yes.
Born in Maryland in 1860. Born into slavery, eventually came out of slavery, but endured a lot of shit. And became a queer resistance leader.
Good for her.
Certainly not someone who is well known in, mainstream American queer history, I think.
Yeah.
Certainly not in mainstream American history, not in the history books as we know them.
Yeah.
But, when we think of drag queen culture and we think of femininity, we have, certain mainstream American conceptions.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, like, to me, I had never heard of that person until you just brought them up. But it's like, well, how are you? I don't know what it is, but mainstream culture makes Black folks hyper straight and hyper cis for some reason. And it's like, fucking with gender has been part of especially Black American culture since forever. It's just, at least as far as when I was growing up, there's always that person who doesn't fit the usual boxes. But it's like, and then I grow up and people are acting like, but I thought all Black people were ... And I'm like,
no.
You just don't know enough Black people.
Yeah.
Right? If that's what you think.
I'm like, no. It's like, no, that is in our culture all throughout our culture. And the white people, and the irony is that the white people they idolize for playing with gender, for instance. And by white people they idolize, I mean David Bowie. Idolize Black performers who did the same thing.
Right.
And David Bowie, interestingly enough, David Bowie would have told you that it was Little Richard.
That's right.
I was going to say it was Little Richard. Yeah.
And like, speaking of Little Richard, oh wow, that poor man. And it's like, okay, he did all that in the 50s, in the South, and I'm like, you're a real one.
His story was wild. I've read some some biographies and some stories about him, and his story was wild, including but not limited to Tutti Frutti being a song about butt sex.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
That
So
definitely changes how I think about the movie with the talking horse that features that song.
Look, me hot to trot, that one.
Yeah. Bobcat Goldthwait was the voice of the talking horse.
And John Candy was the horse.
Man. Yes, that's right. Bobcat Goldthwait wasn't the voice of the horse. He was the dude. And then John Candy was the voice of the horse. That's right. Yeah. Haven't seen that movie in a long time, but it does have that song.
Yes, it does.
Yep. And that's what that song's about.
It was such an 80s movie. They were drinking Tab, okay?
Oh, man. Oh, my childhood.
Yeah. But it's like kind of, and and I know, dear listeners, but this seems like a complete diversion, but it actually isn't, because the colonization influences how we talk about things like gender and sexuality. So
absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's another perfect example about how a lot of the most iconic white people that are most beloved and well known in the popular consciousness were, most influenced by a more iconic Black person who history does not nod to and does not value.
Right.
And that white person often was not secretive about the fact that they were influenced heavily by that Black person.
Yeah. It's like, gee, they're not secretive at all. And this part you can edit out, but this is just fun. I love that MTV interview with David Bowie, where he's like, "Why did you have more Black artists on your program?
Why don't you have some Black artists?"
Just trying to him and hawing and talking about some Midwestern white kid's pants or whatever. And then look,
it was from like 1983, right? Yes. Yes,
why
you should all watch that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I just love it because that way he's like, he knows that guy's full of shit. He knows he got him. And like,
yup.
Like, some guy, it might be a little like, yeah, but I mean, we might be cool with Black people, but like that some kid in the Midwest, Prince might be a little too wild for them. It's like,
yep.
Womp
and he
womp.
goes, so you see what I'm saying? I understand your point of view. So
touche.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's wild. It's from like 1983 or something.
David
like,
Bowie's not what I would call racially ambiguous. Okay.
No, and he's definitely had his own wonderful flirtations with, white supremacy throughout his entire career. So I was thinking, I took a bit of a water closet break, and I was thinking about how we see the ecological impacts of colonization a couple of times in the show. Once, we see it pretty like heavy-handedly in, when they go to Critus, and we see that the planet is literally drained, and that's pretty damn on the nose. But we also see it, and I wonder, and this is what I'm trying to shake out, is that, one of the things that we see is the light is literally taken away from Etheria when we have one of the colonizers, Mara, try to protect it, right? So she takes the actual planet and puts it in a dark dimension and takes the light away from the people there. And so I kind of want to shake that out. And like I said, it's kind of a half-baked idea. It's kind of idea that you have when you're just kind of sitting in the weird forest.
Well, I guess if you're thinking about ecological impacts, the first thing that springs to my mind is the fright zone being such, an ugly urban wasteland. What was that area of Etheria like before the Horde?
Yeah. I wouldn't even say urban. It's just industrial.
I was going to say industrial first, but then I was like, well, what are they producing? What is their industry?
Toxic waste, I guess.
Evil.
Yeah.
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 War orphans and toxic waste.
Yeah, right?
Evil.
I was just going to say, cadets. They're producing cadets.
Yeah, cadets.
And tanks.
Tank.
Yeah, they are the military industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
That's all they are.
Yeah, because, Hordak came in, this planet is disposable to him. All he cares about is looking good to Big Brother. So he doesn't care if he fucks everything up and leaves it toxic and gross.
That's probably what they've done on every other planet, right?
Right. Yeah. As per what we've seen on Critus, as you pointed out.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then you mentioned Mara.
What was the point about the light, taking the light?
So Mara took the stars away, right? That's
she put them in the pocket dimension of Despondos so that they couldn't destroy the rest of the universe. And there's no stars or... I was going to say there's no stars or suns, but the sun is a star. There's no stars in Despondos, but they still have light from the moons.
They still have light from the moons. Right, but there's the Mara took away the stars type of thing. And I always found that kind of an interesting understanding of that. And especially when thinking about the ecological impacts of colonization, and then also thinking about okay, so the indigenous people of Etheria, they have stories about that, and then just kind of trying to put some ideas together in that, and kind of, like I said, it's some threads. I want to weave something, but I only have threads.
I think the show is offering you threads, Meph, is the truth. They're showing you're trying to trying to make a quilt with the threads of that the show gave you. But I think I think what's really missing also from the idea of colonization is there's such a clear lack of indigenous voices, again, in the writers' room, and in terms of environmentalism, and in terms of, the planet and how people interacted with it and how it looked before. The little things that I do know, the very little that I do know, I know that I did it. I don't see in She-Ra in terms of, other than oh my gosh, what's the girl's name with the flowers?
Perfuma.
Flower girl. I'm not a real fan, but I am.
Flower girl.
I guess, it's like that thing. You put a mic in front of you
just
and then
don't love Perfuma as much as some of the others, maybe.
When I would be recording about Buffy, I'm like, I know this shit like backwards and forwards. I like know episode names. I know everything. You put a mic in front of me and then I'm like, what's that person's name again? Like, just like, but I know. Anyways, Perfuma. And like, I think there could be a lot more in terms of like the towns and how the local people like interact with their resources, and we don't see that. We don't know much about like the other resources or how people survive on Etheria. Like, what do they eat? What do they like? What is their ethics system? How do they treat plants and animals? Like, we don't know much about any of that stuff. And so I think that it's something that I think is just really missing in the show that would have been a really cool thing to explore. And in terms of the stars and Mara, I mean, I feel like Mara is almost a completely whole other discussion, you know, of the like failed Shira woman of color who tried to sacrifice herself. You know, there's all these like women of color sacrificing themselves in the show too, right? And you know, I don't know. That was a messy. There's some more threads for the pile.
Yeah. I mean, that would be an excellent conversation after season 4, right? Is talking about like Mara and self-sacrifice, you know, of women of color in order to, you know, save planets.
Yeah.
Yeah. As maybe. Yeah.
Like the Mara and the environmentalism thing has got me weak, and merging with colonialism has also got me thinking, it's like, okay, how does colonialism shape how we understand environmentalism? Because like when the album mentioned, well, what do they eat? And I'm like, have we seen them? Yeah, we've seen them eat, but we don't see them produce any food. Like there was season 5 when they're on the ship. The closest thing they have to is like Roz just has all these baking ingredients from. Well, Roz is Roz, so I guess Roz could just like conjure it from nowhere. But like, they're on the ship, and they've had like reconstituted coleslaw or something.
It's 1,000 years old.
1,000 years old,
but they still
really still good.
And they still managed to make bao too, right? Like
really made to last.
Yeah. Or and then there's like and maybe the closest thing we have to an environmentalist is Perfuma. And spoiler alert, audience, I disagree with Jenny. I do not see her as white, but moving right along. But,
I do see her as white also. I see her as white. How do you see her, Sean?
Vaguely, ethnically, ambiguously brown.
I mean, she has blonde hair and pink skin and freckles.
It's the Valley Girl voice for me.
Yeah. It's the Valley Girl voice, I think, but it's like, okay. And okay, I'm like, well.
I mean, it is a cartoon, and everything's up for interpretation.
Yeah, and it's like,
for
okay,
sure.
Well,
I'm just so curious as to like what aspect of her feels brown.
I mean, it's just like, okay, well, there's that whole you talk white shit that gets on my nerves.
Yeah.
When,
I hear that.
I don't get that a lot, but I've been around long enough that I've seen that come up multiple times. And I'm like, can we not? Because it's not in this really snobby kind of, well, I speak proper English kind of shit, but it's like, well, they, you know, people grew up where they grew up, and they take on those mannerisms.
Yeah.
Those speech mannerisms. So I was just like, I can't really go by the voice always. It's like, and then there's the fact that if we're going to go there, who are the voice actors, and how did they get cast, and who's responsible for that, and dot. So I'm like, okay, so I'm pretty much going by the character designs, because that is very deliberate.
Well, also, see, now this, you know, the same thing's happening to me, right? I'm in front of a microphone. I can't remember things of the show. I literally have a podcast for. Perfuma is the princess of the kingdom of Plumeria. Also, Plumeria has this very much like, sure, it has this like hippie type
which feels
of
very
vibe,
white
but it's also,
to me,
right? But which feels very white, but also like hippie stuff is also deeply appropriative of Native Native American culture specifically, and we have these kind of weird kind of side kind of connections to some sort of quote unquote tribal or historical understanding, because this is where we learn about the She-Ra, right? So we have this like weird, like almost like primitive understanding of the language of the She-Ra, and we see these like, we have the story, the stories have been told of this, the She-Ra. And we actually have Plumeria is the only place that is like telling this as like an oral traditional legend too.
Yeah.
So
and then there's once again, writer's room problem.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now, can I really like how authentic, so to speak?
Right.
Would a white person write a person of color, like just their speech patterns? And it's like,
maybe
and would
that's
I want them
the
to
issue.
try?
I think you're right, Sean. I think like it's trying to make her potentially like an Indigenous representation. However, she just reads. It is not the best representation of that.
Yeah, she reads like a white hippie chick to me.
Yeah.
She
And
reads
her,
like a white hippie chick.
And and her hair and the flower, like the whole like vibe of it. But I think maybe like value wise and ethics wise, it's more in line with brown vibes. And I think that she is the most focused on community. She is the most focused on like the kind of like traditionally like, and I say Indigenous, like globally Indigenous, like that kind of culture of like togetherness, right? And she's very for that and like working with the environment. Maybe Mermista is also like that.
Interesting that the ones with the most, I don't want to say earth-based, that's so tacky. But the ones whose powers focus on like the actual environment they're in. Like the actual connection to the elements. Yeah, the physical substance of Etheria.
But not Frosta very much, though. Right.
Not Frosta, ironically.
Well, yeah.
I don't know. That's a whole other thing of like East Asian coldness vibes, potentially, of like distant.
But her outfit was
I code Frosta with far north, not with east.
Yeah. But she's also vaguely, like her outfit, isn't it vaguely
like Inuit
in some way?
Yeah.
Yeah, Inuit. Is it?
Yeah, that's what I was
thinking.
Vaguely.
And I mean vaguely.
Yeah, but it's also just like icy, like I don't know, like Ice King vibes.
Yeah.
I was
or
thinking,
like
Northern Water Tribe.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like Water Tribe. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, one thing that's missing from the whole world of Etheria, and this might have, again, we all know it's a 22-minute cartoon, but, Avatar and Legend of Korra managed this a lot better, is that there's no wisdom of the elders on Etheria. That's something that's starkly lacking, and that's something that's really strongly present more so in Indigenous cultures.
Also. Yeah. And is very lacking.
Where are all the parents in this
where
world?
are the old people? Right. It can't just be Roz and Angela.
And they're all like annoying, right? Like they're all like to be almost dismissed and like not taken seriously. And that's like a very...
Yeah, I mean, we only have Raz.
Yeah, well, like the parents, like,
Raz, Angela. Angela.
And Angela, who's like overly fretful.
Then we have
not willing to do what needs to be done because she's too afraid. And like, what other parents do we have? We have younger adults. We have the aunties who are like part of the team and are a little bit older, but we don't have tribal elders of any kind.
No. Or like Castaspella, who's also just like passive aggressive and very like judgmental but loving and It was interesting. I heard Shadow Weaver.
Right. Oh my gosh. We have elders in the horde only.
Yes.
I heard you talking
bad
about
parents. Yeah.
glitter. Oh no.
Sparkles.
Hello, Sparkles.
We're all tired. It's all good.
As Asian, but I didn't catch that for some reason. I had like seen her as actually I had read her as more Jewish and Micah. But
that's interesting.
We did talk about Micah in our last recorded episode, actually.
The reason that I coded her as Asian is because she's voiced by an Asian actress, and so is her father.
Right. No, it makes sense. Yeah. And Casaspella is Sandra Oh, so that makes sense. Like they're all Asian.
That seems like a
choice.
Yeah, that's a choice.
That seems like a choice.
Yeah.
Specifically Korean.
Like once might be a fluke. But
out of context, if I had no knowledge, I could definitely see Glimmer as a pushy little Jew.
I got like Jewish vibes from the whole family. Yeah, I don't know. Micah sounded like...
I love that read. I love that.
I do too.
I don't know.
Oh, I certainly didn't.
Yeah, no, it's super fair. I'm not Jewish, so I don't have a say, but I was like, I was like looking at it, like squinting at my screen. I was like, what are these people coded? What is every single character coded as? I was like, these people read Jewish to me. But I guess I was mistaken.
No, I can see it.
Is it the overbearing mother thing?
That's a reasonable association.
Not Angela. I don't read Angela as Jewish at all.
Okay.
No, she's not
Glimmer.
Angela.
Okay.
Glimmer, Casaspella, I could see that more in line, or like just like the whole magic vibe. I think Micah especially, maybe because I know Amika. It just feels like a Jewish name.
Well, Micah is a Hebrew name.
Is a Hebrew name, yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
It's a biblical name.
So I'm not
in that,
but it's also a shiny gem.
In that all biblical names that are Jewish can also be Christian. It is a biblical Jewish name.
Micah, I guess, would be
Micah
Michael.
Is the shortened form. It's a shortened form of Michael.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Casaspella. Yeah, that's a. And it's like, okay, are these writers Jewish? Because if they have, I don't know. Because that whole thing with Casaspella is kind of like, what are you doing with that? kind of thing. It was like, interesting. And there's like, isn't ND formerly evangelical or raised evangelical or something?
Yes, ND was raised evangelical Christian.
Oh.
And then it's a whole other bag.
Yeah. That informs a lot of the show. Yeah, that informs a lot of the show.
Yeah. But yeah.
And he's been very, very like forthcoming about that.
And there's a whole and that is a whole other series of episodes that we can do about how evangelicals and ex-evangelicals can be very they leave God and Jesus behind, but they keep all the white supremacy. But yeah, to get back to the point about like Mara and taking away the stars and trying to tug at that thread a bit more. I think part of like, again, it's one of those situations where I think the fact that the writer's room is all white people or mostly white people is showing through.
No, I think it's all white people.
It's all white people. Okay, I tried internet.
Oh.
I didn't want to overstate the case, but
that's
it is what it is.
No, I'm saying it though. I'm not giving them more credit than they deserve.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they are bad people.
No,
but you know, like, you can't speak to experience that is not your own. And when you have a group that is homogenous, then they are all speaking to the same experience. And on the flip side, I'm sorry I interrupted you in the middle of your point. Let me let you finish.
Yeah, I was like, well, this is where it's kind of coming from because the way they present the environmental stuff, it's almost like the environmental stuff is completely disconnected from the people.
Mm-hmm, yes.
It's like
that's exactly. Thank you. That was where I was trying to shake out.
It's like, yes. You remember that old environmentalist thing with the that native guy with the one tear? That native guy with the one tear who apparently was not even Native American.
Yeah, he was Italian, right?
Yes. What is this?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So Sean, do you wanna, or I can? One of us can. Okay. Okay, because you look like you're going to die laughing.
Yes.
So in the late 60s, actually, there was an ad campaign, a Don't Litter campaign, which is, which is where we were for environmental, environmental messaging for a very long time.
Just
and
don't
it
litter.
was
That's environmentalism.
Don't litter. And it was a dude driving down the road and he chucks a beer can or something out the window. And you just, as he passes by, you just see this shot of this dude dressed in really stereotypical Native American clothes.
It has a war bonnet.
With a yeah, he has a war bonnet, and he's just and a leather apron, and it's
offensive.
It's
and
bad.
He has one single tear,
and they see a single tear, and then they zoom in, and you just see the single tear running down his face, and then it's don't litter, and you're like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And
because that's the problem. That's why he's
exactly.
crying,
Well, first,
for sure.
that's the right,
but because of litter.
Yes,
because of litter, but yes, and this, and it shows the the disconnection as Sean was saying.
And I actually think that your point connects back to my point about the lack of tribal elders, because there's no knowledge about how did we get here in terms of Etheria's past. No one knows about Mara taking away the stars. They might have some stories about the day the stars disappeared, but they don't know what happened.
We have the scrolls that are in the library.
In this dead language that no one has ever learned how to translate.
Right. And that's all we have as viewers to get this to get this.
It's just that, for instance, indigenous cultures, for instance, the lack of elders makes the fact that these very young people are the only people in power look very strange.
Yes.
So it's it doesn't have to be this autocratic, top-down, militaristic thing like the Horde, but it also doesn't have to be basically the 21st century United States. I get it. It's a fantasy series. I get it. It's just the fact that they're not, the fact that these social structures are not, I guess, not even informed by these alternatives that were historical fact.
Which is within itself an effective colonialism.
Yes. And I think also I don't actually have a problem with how Etheria is structured. I enjoy it. I like the idea of princesses. I like the runestones, but I think it merits a little, it merits just a little what's that about? So just to be okay, what is this about? Okay, well, that's what that's about. Well, that's fine. I still like it. It's cool.
What's it going to look like when these princesses are 30 years older and have kids of their own who are coming of age? What's the power structure going to look like then?
Yeah. It's and I know, especially now that, Angela's not there, you don't have that. Angela, I think, is the closest thing to an elder this show had.
Raz?
And I say, Raz
Raz. Yeah.
I don't even know.
She's not
Raz
always around. She just pops in and out when she feels like it.
Totally.
Is Raz like a flesh and blood person or an entity?
We have all sorts of conversations lined up about that. Raz just is.
Next time.
Yeah, because it's
Raz just is.
Up for debate. There are many theories about Raz.
Yeah, and of course Raz is at least old enough to have known Mara.
Yes, she definitely knew Mara.
Yeah.
We've seen flashbacks of them together.
Is she old enough?
She got a box of sugar from Mara.
See, that's what I mean.
And is there a difference between those two things?
See, that's what I mean. And it's not I want to discount Raz, and it's also Raz does not communicate in a standard way.
No, I love it.
So passing
unstuck from time, she is.
Yeah. So
she's Yoda. She's Bubby Yoda.
Yeah. So she's
Bubby Yoda.
Yeah.
She's coded as Jewish.
You think?
Yeah.
I mean, I always thought her accent was kind of Italian.
I got
Eastern European vibes from her accent.
It's really up for debate. I didn't think it was Eastern European. I'm Eastern European, and I didn't think her accent was Eastern European, but it's really up for debate. I really think that you can see a lot of different things in her.
Mm-hmm. I think she's old grandma like vibes, and I think that I think that lady,
that's for sure.
I think that lady,
I think that's who you
everywhere. You know, like
that's true.
Certainly,
but that lady is there. She's around.
Yeah, but
and
she's interesting where
rad.
the place she occupies in Etherian culture, which is on the margins.
Yes.
Living by herself in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And nobody thinks to ask her anything or to go to her for, like, maybe Adora. That's it.
Once.
I think,
or twice.
Yeah, once. And I think Swiftwind is the only one who goes to see her. Like,
yeah, he even says, you got to keep an eye on old ladies living alone in the woods.
Yep. Because Swiftwind knows how to build community, right? Yeah, it's a true activist right there.
Thought for 3 days, and I figured it out.
Yeah, and it's like, and then besides Roz, there's Angela, who, as far as everyone else knew, was immortal, and it turns out she very much, well, technically immortal, but she's not coming back. So.
No, not anytime soon.
It's like the crystal gems, right? From Steven Universe.
Yeah.
Like, they can live forever, but they're not immune to destruction.
Yeah, I guess.
Meph and I actually didn't see that show. We both gave it a shot, tried to watch the first few episodes, and just couldn't get through it.
Better. It's
I just skipped to the good parts, which is the end.
I will do that then.
I skipped to the good parts. Like the parts, like I watched those like must watch Steven Universe episodes, and then I pretty much understood everything. Yeah, so that's what that me and Steven Universe. It's like, okay, I get why this is popular, but it's definitely not for me. And there's also like a whole issue of how people really did not like the restorative justice angle. But anyway, it's like, okay, there's Angela, who is supposedly an immortal angelic being, which is not quite the same as, it's an elder, but not, because.
Right. It's like a vampire.
Yeah, almost. It's like, well, like.
Vampire with a soul.
Yeah, vampire with a soul and wings.
Angela.
Named Angela. And it's like, she's been around, and she was there for like the first Princess Alliance, and she's trying to teach Glimmer things, I guess. And it's almost like, hell, I don't want to do this anymore. Oh no. I have to say it's kind of ageist.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's very ageist.
Yeah.
Like, I can't think of a single character over like 25 who's not I don't want to say a complete scumbag. That's not true, but like
Bo's parents are all right.
I mean, I think of Spinnerella and Natasha. Yeah, Bo's parents. I think of Spinnerella and Natasha as being in their 30s.
Yeah, they're older,
but they're not involved. Like, they're not. They have to be dragged kicking.
Not until the last season. Yeah,
and you don't see them involved.
Ultimately, I think all of this, the ageism and the fact that the princesses are the leaders of everything, is in service of the fact that this is all based on a previous show from the 80s where the princesses were already established as the main characters and they had to stay true to that. So to some extent, their hands were tied about making the princesses the leaders and the main characters.
Well, it's the same thing with like Adora's character design, period, where it's like, has to be blonde and blue-eyed, period. I think was the requirement.
Yeah.
And that just made
there are unconfirmed rumors that ND wanted Adora to be black in the reboot, and the network execs, whether it was Mattel, the toy company that made the original, or whether it was Netflix, someone in power said no to that because they wanted Adora to be recognizable as the original Adora.
Yeah.
Apparently calling her Adora isn't enough. But okay.
Yeah, right.
I know.
So we've touched repeatedly on the idea that, you can't see what you can't see when there isn't diversity in the writer's room. And so I just wanted to flip that on its head and point out that the greatest success of the show is the diversity of queer voices on the show. And that only can happen because of the diversity of queer voices in the writer's room. And, that's been such a joy. And I mean, I don't think that we would be here at all making this podcast if not for that radical beauty and diversity of queer voices on this show and, different kinds of queer characters. And that's never been seen in an all ages show before. It's not just like the queer character. Yeah. They're all the queer character, bitch.
Yeah, they are.
And that mirrors real life. If you are a queer person, you know that queers travel in packs and we're not all cut from the same mold. And that is, an incredible thing to be able as a queer person, let alone as a young queer person or a queer child, to be able to turn on the TV and see a show where you can relate to any one of any number of queer characters. And so our next aspirational thing is to see a variety of BIPOC queer characters. That's going to be the next great thing that we're looking for in our next animated all ages show.
So if you're making stuff, the bar has been set. You have to surpass She-Ra.
That's right.
You're here.
Yes.
And so, it's not just about
Steven Universe.
What we're, this show failed at this. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying that Steven Universe is bad just because it's not my cup of tea. There was something about the short form aspect.
Fair.
It was a little bit too nonlinear. I just couldn't follow
That's fair.
it.
But
and
they do.
But I'm sure it's fantastic.
Honestly, like the Garnet is very cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'll give it another chance one of these days.
So first, thank you so much for joining us. And do you all have anything you want to pitch and give us our socials so we can share it with our listeners?
I am at Project StimZoom on Twitter. That's Project TZIMTZUM. And I understand Elon Musk is making it is taking it down another layer in Dante's Inferno, but I am there. You can find me there. Or at projectzimzoom.com, and you can contact me with a little contact.
And you can find me at Alba Daza on Instagram. That's ALBADAZA and albadaza.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
And of course, those links will also be in our show notes.
Yay. Yes. And thank you for joining us. This was a blast. And
thank you so much, friends. We love you. We adore you. This was a wonderful conversation.
Come back. This was awesome.
Thanks for having it.
Format.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like this format. Yeah.
Super great to meet you, Meth and Sean.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, it was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
And yay! This was great. This was great. I'm excited. Well, folks, if you liked what you heard and you want to continue into the conversation, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast fix. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at HeyAdoraCast. And please email us if you want to continue to join in on this conversation at heyadoracast@gmail.com. In case you forgot.
And don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. That's something we always forget to mention, but it really helps more people find us.
All good marks across the board. Say how handsome we are and how super smart we are, too. Yay. And in case you may have forgotten or just, never knew, we have a Patreon. So please, join us in our Patreon, become a member. We have awesome perks. We have bonus episodes. We have an incredible Discord where we absolutely will continue this conversation. I make playlists for folks. Jenny reads gay stories for you. So give us a check out. Give us a check out.
Yeah, I've kind of fallen down on the job in the last couple of weeks with the gay stories, but I will come back soon, I promise. We also have live watches and live chats, all kinds of fun, lively interactions that you can have with us in the Patreon space.
We are super fun. And you can find a link to our Patreon as well as all of the things on the internet that we have at heyadora.gay. Yeah.
That's the one.
The only
gay.
And remember,
gay.
Queer joy is radical.
And queer love saves the universe.
Hooray. Woo.